Hello, beloved. We want to pick up where we left off in all of our studies and really explore right now how great and how powerful God created us. Because as we've learned over the many years as being Christians, we have been given an amazing power in our soul and in our spirit to change not only the surroundings, but the way we think and the way we perceive life. And the older we get, we start to realize that power was always inside of us. But it's only at those intervals in our life where we start to take a step back and see that many of the things that we believed have been going through transitional changes. And that's healthy and that's important. But today I just want to encourage you so that you'll take a step back and look at how great you've been created. I put a little picture up here and it describes the condition we are in this physical realm. It says, the magnetic you. We are the attraction for everything we want. And we cannot assume that things on the outside must take place before we can experience what we desire. What do I mean by that? I can remember thinking when I was a kid, reading all of these horoscopes. These people would go into great detail about if you're born in a certain month, under a certain influence of a planet, in a so-called house, that your behaviors and your attitudes are going to be a certain way. And so many people started focusing on that kind of belief. And sure enough, the things in their external started to line up with those beliefs. So it gave them more influence to believe that. I've heard stories where people say, I notice that at certain intervals in my life, I see this number like 11 and 11 on a clock, or 444. And I'm starting to become aware that when I see these numbers, certain things happen in my life. So I'm giving you these examples to show you that through our life, things change in the way we perceive and believe. Our belief should be transitional. You never come to the experience where you have arrived. That's the magnificent thing about who God made you to become. He made you to become that eternal being that's always experienced a greater dimension of who He is. And that's the privilege we have as physical beings in this spiritual dimension that we call Earth. Because it is spiritual. And I've said over and over again that we're not physical with a spirit in us. We are physical inside the spirit. And we choose to see things according to what we believe. And that was the reason I was giving you those examples. But today we have reached places inside of our understanding and inside of our growth in Christ to recognize we're not who we think we are so many times. And that's so important. Because Jesus, when He walked this earth, He said things from the spirit dimension. He was very, very careful to use words that showed that He was not physical. In fact, He said, the words I speak are spirit. And He said, the flesh profits nothing. That defines the reality of who we are. If we are in Him, and we are, then the flesh profits nothing. But our spiritual nature is the reality of who we are. And it's that spiritual nature that's capable of changing our wrong beliefs, our wrong perceptions, our wrong condition, whether it be a disease, whether it be some kind of affliction in a family member, whatever the situation is in your life, you have been given the power to alter that condition from the inside out. We've spoken about the fact that the physical realm is created from atoms. And we know these atoms are electrical pieces of energy in this dimension. They're the particle that was spirit. And so just like in the quantum realm, mind and matter are connected. So if you are a magnet, what is it that you are attracting? What is it that you are bringing inside your peripheral world that you've created? Because we said over and over again, we are the authors, we are the creators of the world that we operate in and believe. So what is it that you're attracting? We're always emitting a frequency. That's what we do as physical, spiritual beings that are interacting with this dimension. This dimension is cause and effect, right and wrong. This is the three-dimensional realm that our physical being is located in. Not who you are, but your physical being is located. So when you interact with this dimension, you're emitting a frequency, an energy, and you're displaying this in everything that you operate in and around. The question is, what kind of energy and frequency are you emitting into this dimension? This three-dimension will respond to that frequency. So when you think about a thought and you observe a thought, that thought has an electrical charge that goes out into this dimension. Now your feelings have a magnetic charge that sends the thought out. So it connects to send the thought out. Now, if it's unified, then that frequency has a resonating force that pulls back the same frequency and resonating frequency inside the spirit dimension. That's how you change the physical. We spoke about that when you talk about prayer. So if your thoughts and feelings are united, then it becomes a resonating force that connects with the spiritual dimension to give you what you are connecting to. That's the possibilities Jesus talked about. He said everything is possible if you can believe. You're not believing if your thoughts are one thing and your feelings are another. That's not believing. You're in a separation. You're in a diametrically opposed. You're not sending a magnetic charge that's unified into the field. So you're not going to bring back something equal to that unified feeling. That's why you see problems with people who want stuff. They want a car, they want money, they want riches, they want fame. All of those things are thoughts that they're generating electrical charges into the field. But in their bodies, they're feeling lack, they're feeling angry, they're feeling fearful, they're feeling afraid, they have a diagnosis of some kind of disease. So those thoughts that are going out to try to draw something back from the mind is not connected with the feeling in their body. So what happens? Every time you have a thought, you produce a chemistry. That chemistry is made inside of your brain. That chemistry goes into your body and it starts to become the feeling of lack in your body. It starts to become the feeling of sickness in your body, the feeling of anger in your body, jealousy. Whatever that emotional feeling is from the thoughts that you've generated starts to take over the body. What do I mean take over? The magnetic field of the body in the heart is the strongest energy field. And it draws so much power. The heart is such a powerful instrument that those feelings and emotions start to take all the energy that was created for unity and starts making division. So in your mind, you have a desire for something different than what your body has started to resonate with in the feelings of lack, anger, disease, jealousy, victimization, whatever it is. Because you're not creating anything powerful when you're separated. So the more separated you become, the more you try to control. That's what people do. So in that condition, you look for something on the outside to bring you relief from the feelings you're having on the inside. If a person is feeling bad, feeling lack, feeling anger, they're looking for some kind of relief on the outside, not understanding that the power that was put inside of them is greater than what they're trying to find to relieve that situation on the inside. And this happens to so many people every day. We get letters every day from people who want some kind of deliverance. They're having problems in their marriage, with their children, whatever it is. So they're looking for help because they don't understand that they've been created with such greatness and such power that they don't have to be victims to the situations that they're finding themselves in. Now that's a hard concept for most people to understand because you're brought up believing that the physical realm is designed to give you what you need. That you have to work hard, you have to get a good education, you have to have a lot of money in order to provide yourself with the things you want. And that's absolutely possible. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It happens. If you want to put yourself through the rigors of trying to earn the money or the status, whatever it is, you can do that. But generally what happens is it puts people in all kinds of stress. Because when you don't get what you want, immediately you become stressful. And you put yourself in a survival mode. And the survival mode is what produces those hormones of stress. And that's what saps all the energy from your being. Now, your state of being is the most important part of wholeness. And how you think and how you feel is your state of being. And if that is diametrically opposed or split, then your state of being is not wholeness. And we've spoken about this in the past. Now, the conditioning that we are all grown to believe is that if we don't have something visible, that our senses can tell us that it's real, then we're not getting what we want. And that's the conditioning. That's the hypnotic trance that we're all created and conditioned to believe. Unless I can touch it, taste it, smell it, feel it, it's not real. This has always been the problem for mankind because he doesn't understand the greatness that he was created with. In fact, Jesus said, "Don't you know that you're God's little g?" He was telling his disciples and telling all those people in Jerusalem, God created you great. That's what Adam was created, just like the Son of God, with the power to change his surroundings, change his belief, change everything according to his connection with the Father. And when you can get hold of that, then you start to go inside instead of outside. And that's the message of today. Listen to me. Your condition will not change if you're trying to find the solution on the outside. Because we become so familiar with our past and so familiar with the routines that we put ourselves into, because it gives us comfort. It gives us a sense of well-being. When you focus on the external and you try to control everything that happens in your life, that's a very stressful condition to be in. And remember, your brain was created to predict the future. That's your brain, because it's a survival mechanism. It was put on your body and you were given senses to protect your body. Not who you are, but the physical part of you. So if you're using your brain to predict what's going to happen, and then something happens outside of the ordinary, what happens? You become more frightened and you focus more on the material. You focus more on the particle and less on the spirit. And your heart can't open up to make changes in your life when your brain is in control of trying to control your future. You follow what I'm saying? The more we try to control, the more separated we become. And the more we try to cheat, steal, and do whatever it takes to get what we want, because that's what materialists do. And you become a materialist when you're more focused on the outside than you are the inside. That's the message I want you to hear me right now. Now, how do you change that? Because it's not comfortable, but it is very, very easy to do. All you need to do is understand what your position as God's creation has given you the authority over. He says you're not to be afraid. You're not to be fearful. You're not to worry. In fact, he tells the disciples, take no thought for tomorrow. He says, don't worry about what's coming. You're to be focused on right now. And if you respond emotionally to situations in your environment, you're using all of the energy God's given you for creation for stress. And you start regulating genes and hormones of stress in your body, which creates disease, which changes your perception. Jesus said, you have what you believe. Jesus said, you have what you believe. He says that in Mark 11:24. Let's see if we can read that. Therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask, when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. Now what is he saying? He's saying if you are praying, which means if you are in unity, then you have to believe that whatever you ask for, you already have. But you say, it's not visible. How can I have it if I can't see it? Well, Jesus has said, you have it. So either Jesus is a liar or you're not paying attention to the reality of the spiritual dimension. And I think it's the latter. I think if we start feeling what it is we want inside in this spiritual being of who we are, then the manifestation will start to happen. Why? Because the feelings I told you about your emotions, how powerful they are as a magnet, and you become this prayer, you start sending that energy, that spiritual resonating power into the spirit realm, and it starts to attract what it is you've asked for. When that happens, those electrons in the physical realm will start to vibrate and resonate at that frequency and start to attract what it is you've asked for. This is the manifestation of the spirit into the physical. This is how Jesus manifested the physical whenever he prayed. Remember when he took the fish and the bread? He saw and he believed. And that manifestation started to occur instantly. Well, it happens faster for him because he had no doubt. We have to go through layers and layers and layers of doubt and unbelief because we've been trained for so long to believe that if it's not manifesting right away, then God didn't hear our prayer. And what he said wasn't true. So we've got to force the issue. We've got to make it happen. And the more we do that, the less connected we are with the spiritual dimension. So we become further and further away from the reality of that wholeness and oneness we have with God. Now this is really critical for us to start getting hold of because we've been conditioned. I've used that word. What is conditioning? Conditioning is when you have an image and an emotion. That's how everything functions in this three-dimensional realm. You have an image and you create an emotion with it. If you're watching TV, for instance, and you hear a voice come on the TV that says, men over 30, if you've had measles or you've had some kind of childhood disease, you are susceptible to this condition. And they show you a picture of some ugly, horrible condition on the person's body, and you emotionally go, oh, could that be me? Emotionally, you've opened up your heart And then they start giving you that image and the conditioning begin. And then a person starts to go, well, maybe that could happen. So maybe I need to listen to what he's telling me. And all of a sudden, you're looking on Google, you're going to all of these different sites to try to determine if maybe you've got that condition. So you've already planted the seed in your mind, and your thoughts and attention start to go on this image, and this emotional charge starts to connect with this image, and now pretty soon you're drawing that situation into your life. Because you put your thoughts and your emotions and you sent that signal out into the spirit realm, and it's going to give you what you want. So the stronger that emotional and mental image, the more power you put in attracting it. So all of a sudden, by thought alone, you can create the condition in your physical body. The same thing can happen in the opposite. You put your energy into the thoughts of God, the power of believing what He says, and not looking for the external to prove what He said, but believing what He said. That energy starts to resonate inside of your spirit and starts to send that signal in the spirit realm. The exact thing will happen that happens in disease will happen in your future prosperity. You generate things from inside. You don't have them from the outside. So if you can start to feel the emotion before it arrives, the sooner that condition manifests in the physical. That's called collapsing the wave. Remember, we've talked about that before. When a wave or a spirit becomes particle, that's collapsing the wave. So that's what we do as spiritual beings. You want something manifested, you have to collapse that wave. Make it particle, make it manifest. So now you understand the greatness of who we are created to be, the power that is resonating on the inside of us, and what stops that power from manifesting the physical. The hormones of stress. It's the inability to see the spiritual dimension. It's the unbelief and the doubt. All of those are chemistry inside of you that affect your emotional center, your heart, and starts to shrink that magnetic field that was put around you. The magnetic field was created by God for His man, for all human beings. That magnetic field is the balance between how you think and how you feel. You're actually an electromagnetic field. And that field either expands or shrinks, determined by how much separation there is between your thoughts and your feelings. So the more you're unified with thoughts and feelings, the greater that field expands. But that doesn't happen if your attention is on the environment. If your attention is on the physical, that's what shrinks the field. So emotionally, when your power of that magnetic field is in balance, you are that perfect electromagnetic force that will draw and resonate with the divine. And that's what manifests into the physical. So, we understand that that is our creation. That's the power of the magnetic you that I talked about. In this lesson, I want you to see that what Jesus was talking about was very, very simple to understand. Look at what He says in Matthew 28. This has been spoken about many times, and I think it's important to know, because this is after He resurrected and before He left the disciples. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore, make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Observe is another word of being conscious. Teach them to be conscious of all the things I have commanded you. Now, he spoke a lot, but he gave 2 or 3 commandments. And they were the most important commandments that he wants you to be aware of. Look in Matthew 22. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. But then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment of the law?" And he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Those were 2 commandments. And over in John 13, he says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another." So when Jesus is saying this in Matthew 28, he's saying, go and disciple the nations, immersing them in the Godhead, and teach them to observe. Teach them to be conscious of what I said are the commandments. Love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the greatest commandment is love one another. So he's showing the commandments that he's talking about. Are you observing? Are you being conscious of the love that is produced when your heart and your mind are together? When your thoughts and your heart are together, are you producing love? Are you in harmony with the love that I've created inside of you, which is the greatest power on the planet? Are you emitting that frequency? Is that the chemistry that you're putting into the physical dimension? Not judgment, not condemning, not going and trying to defeat or destroy, but loving. And a disciple, what's a disciple? A disciple is just what Jesus did. He just went around and did what he did, and the disciples that followed him got to see a man who was God producing that oneness in the planet, that love, that oneness of loving the Father with all his heart, and loving his neighbor as himself, and loving one another. That was the discipleship that trained that nation and went out and trained other nations. You don't do it by giving them laws and regulations. He already showed that man can't live the law. He said, if you just look at a woman and lust after her, you've committed adultery. All of the laws cannot be kept by anyone but Christ. That's why he was the fulfillment of the law and the prophets when he walked this earth. He came as the one who fulfilled what was demanded by God on this and in this dimension. He fulfilled it. And then he says, all that authority that was given to Satan, given to the lawbreaker, was given to me. Now all the power you see in the heavens, you see on the earth, resides in me. And if you reside in me, you don't need to go after something you already have. But you have the power to feel what I've already overcome and have the authority, and then that safety, that security that you've been striving to have by trying to predict your future, you can rest now because it's already on the inside of you. You don't need to go after something you have. In fact, you can start giving away everything you have physical because you don't need anything. You can generate it from the inside of you. All abundance is generated from the inside. All health and healing generated from the inside. You don't need to find it on the outside. You don't need that doctor to tell you what's wrong with you because you've got the answers on the inside. You're already healed. You're already abundant. But if you don't know it, you're going to run after something and miss the greatest opportunity to live in the wholeness and in the love and in the great commandment that Jesus has given you as a physical being. Change your neighbor's condition by loving Him. Change the condition of this planet by loving it. You're physically created to change the earth and the times and everything in it the same way God did. Why? Because you don't exist as an image. You don't exist as a separate being from God. You are back and one with Him. If you're one with Him, you don't have an image of a sickness. You don't have an image of a lack. You don't have an image of a jealousy or fear, because that requires having an image separate from God. If you're back in Him, you're not separate from Him. He is doing it, and you're at rest while He does what He does. That's how you can live in peace. Because if you needed to do something, if you had to achieve something, the law would still be in place. But the law was finished and completed by Christ. So as we live in Him, we no longer have to judge. We no longer have to condemn. We no longer have to run after something, because that image and that personality is no longer there. I said earlier, how you think and how you feel is your personality. And from that thinking, feeling, and acting, you produce your personal reality. And when that personal reality is in conflict from the reality of heaven on earth through you, then you're living outside of God. It cannot be in conflict. It has to be in direct correlation with God saying, all things have been given to me. All authority has been given to me. All you need to do is understand that and disciple nations to observe my commandments so they can live like I lived. Without lack, without sickness, without disease, without condemning, without judging. Jesus didn't have any enemies. Jesus didn't have any enemies. Neither do you. So everything you see going on around you in this physical world, regardless of how it appears, regardless of how destructive it is to mankind, recognize that your responsibility is not to change that, but to change you from your focus from out there to in here. When you change your perception and you change condemning and judging out there, things start changing out there. Things start to change out there. People start to change out there. Why? Because you're no longer concerned about it. Your attention is not there. Where you put your attention is where your energy goes. And it just is like gasoline on the fire. The more you put your energy and attention on situations that you've made a judgment about, the weaker you become and the more you become matter. The more you become particle, the less you become spirit. The more you become spirit, the greater the change you can have around you. But you can't have a change around you if your attention is outside and not inside, loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind. When you pay attention to His commandments and you're conscious of His commandments and let what goes on around you go on around you, one day the change will be dramatic. Now, I hope you understand some of what I've told you here today, because if you get hold of what I'm saying, you'll understand that it's up to us to really consciously observe the commandments of Jesus. Consciously be aware of when we are emotionally connected to the physical and not emotionally connected to the spirit. When you see that happening, when you react to things in your environment, take a step back, don't judge it, just consciously understand it. Remember I told you thoughts produce a chemistry? That chemistry is addicting to people. That chemistry causes people to bring situations into their life so they can feel that. They bring betrayal into their life so they can feel the chemistry of that betrayal. They bring people into their lives so they can feel angry with that person. We bring that in. We're the magnet. When you understand that, when you can see that and not be connected to it, then you start to melt into the heart and into the mind of Christ. And that image that you've created starts to fade away. And in that image was where the disease was, it was where the mistrust was, it was where the fear was. That image that you've created by thinking and feeling starts to dissolve. And when it starts to dissolve, so does everything that was with that image. And you take on the image of the living Christ. Until next time.